Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talking Rubbish Podcast. This is episode 8, and we're featured by the incredibly talented community builder and NFT educator, Data. Hello, Data.
Hey, Data.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great to have you. I suppose we should start. We'll ask how your day's been and stuff first. How have you been?
I've been great. Busy, super busy lately. But yeah, it's been a crazy summer. I've actually been traveling, working remotely, full time for a while. But glad to be home now and excited.
I had questions about that actually.
Yeah.
Without getting too much into it, I thought I saw the pictures with your GMs, right? And you were in all these beautiful places, and you were still able to like somehow be more present than I could ever dream of being on. And you're fun. You're a fun personality in the space because you seem to be very, very, very active, and also you've been really open about like balancing time. And then on top of that, I see pictures of you're traveling and all that. So I'd love to hear about like how you found the way to like balance all that. But also, I kind of want to hear about like the fun European trip that you had.
Yeah, I actually wrote a thread recently about balancing. It's all about time boxing, right? And choosing some time when you're working and choosing some time when you have some fun. It's, a lot of the people I work with are on U.S. hours, and so in order to overlap with them, we kind of I shoved all my meetings into between 9 a.m. and noon Pacific time, which was like 6 to 9 p.m. The local time where I was, which was hard at times, but meant that I had a lot of time during the day when I didn't have meetings and could either be out exploring or getting some real work done. And I've done it a couple times now, and it works really well. If you're okay staying up a little late and talking to people at the end of the day, it works out nicely.
Great. I was going to ask myself, how did you actually get into the space, and how has your life changed since getting into the space?
That's a good question. Well, I've been following Gary Vaynerchuk for over 15 years now. I found him back when I was in college, starting to drink a little wine, and I must have Googled something, and up pops his Wine Library TV YouTube channel, which was amazing. It kind of, anyway, it's a bit of a tangent, but so I've been following Gary on and off for many years, and with the pandemic, kind of bored, scrolling Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be, and Gary starts talking about this thing, NFTs, and you got to put some ETH in your wallet, and it's like, okay, this could be exciting. Anyway, I minted some VFriends and immediately was like, oh my god, it's more fun than I've had since collecting Pokemon cards or baseball cards. Like, what's next? And so, I suppose, as you say, the rest is history, but instantly hooked and felt like it offers so many things for so many different types of people. Whether that's the community component, the collectability, whether it's about forward-looking technology. That was another piece for me. When I was starting my career, iOS development, Android and Apple iOS development were kind of kicking off, and I had some friends who decided to specialize in that. What's cool is when a new technology comes around, you have just as much experience as everyone else, right? Zero. And I chose to be more of a generalist and kind of regretted that. Those people who were there during the beginning were the ones who, big names in the space 5-10 years later. And so felt like this was another opportunity. Okay, no one has any experience doing this, right? And so let's not only get in on the ground floor, but let's help define what this space should look like. So kind of a combination of all those things landed me where I am now, full-time Web3. I have been coming up on a year, but it's been a ride. It's been fun.
I hear the siren in the background, and I look at your PFP, and I think they want you. They're gonna get you.
They're coming after me. I live by a fire station, and yeah,
they're closing in. I I did want to ask then too. When we were like preparing for this podcast with you, one of the things that we like to do is Mence likes to graciously do a little bit of research on them and kind of introduce some of the highlight things that they do. And then when it came to you, we thought, well, he does a lot of things, right? He does a lot. He's kind of got his fingers in a lot of things, or his hands in a lot of things. And I know why I like you. And I'll get to that in a sec. But I thought I'd give you a chance to like share, like if you had to write like the little thing of what does data do in the space, how would you answer that?
I would say that the reason I created data, it's actually a name given to me, but the genesis of this Twitter handle was all about empowering people with the tools they need to succeed. And for me, it holds true more than ever, right? So whether that's commentary, whether that's advice, I had all sorts of series on Twitter where I had lists of tips of what to do, all about helping people make smart decisions, right? Sometimes that's saying something that makes them think a slightly different way, right? I pose a lot of questions in hope, and I think it's true that those questions help you look at something a little bit differently, or take a minute and stop and think, well, what is my opinion on that? Or, how do I define Web3? And early on started providing a lot of
You
data.
are the best at that, in my opinion, too, by the way. That's like your talent. Like, you are like a step above. Like, you know how everybody has like a question of the day? You are like a step ahead of everyone else in that way, for sure.
I appreciate it. So, well, yeah. So, and it's really held true to the core. And, I think the one thing that I've really tried to do with all of it is stay super consistent. I've taken, this is not so great for my mental health, but I don't know, I've taken maybe only collective 2 weeks off from posting in the last year. A little bit of vacation here or there, some mental health days, but I'm trying to be a consistent voice of positivity, a voice of really stand for the little guy. Often, early on, it was clear that there were some players taking advantage of others, whether that was through simple pump and dumps, right? Or taking advantage of people who don't know how rare a trait was. And so I was like, man, I'm going to create some data. I'm going to actually equip people with the numbers they need to make the smart decisions themselves. And so they can, this was before there were any tools. There was nothing. It was basically open. I was scraping data from OpenSea's website. And so it's just like, even a pump and dump, like,
there's an old Excel sheet somewhere.
Many. Yeah. It's just simple things like, oh, wow, this person just sold all of their all of their holdings, even though they're talking about, how great the project is. So that was another big piece, and hence the name. But yeah, I'm hoping that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of follow up on that, I know you were saying you do help a lot of people in this space. What do you think will be like a big factor on onboarding more people into the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are a couple things that I suppose I am behind the scenes working on both. One is a PR problem, marketing problem. Web3, when people say Web3, when they hear NFTs, they think scams, they think Ponzi schemes, they think rug pulls, fraudsters. I'm talking about people outside the space. And that's because those are the headlines they're fed, right? And I feel really strongly that there's another story to be told that isn't being told. And so, that's one of the things.
It's like Pokemon 2.0.
That's right. Yeah. That's one of the things I've been trying to do is change the narrative and highlight the things that I think are awesome. And it's a little hard to be consistent on LinkedIn just because of the format, but I've started to dabble on LinkedIn a little bit to try to appeal to an audience that isn't necessarily in our bubble. The other thing I think is simply features, functionality, user experience, right? It's too easy to get taken advantage of. It's too hard to get money in a wallet and figure out how to sign up. So I believe both of those things are solvable with better tools, right? And so whether that's better in terms of the technology they're using, or better in terms of just their user experience and how they've designed it. Those are the two big things that I think we need. And I actually think we might need a name change. No one calls it Web 2. They call it social media, right? They call it Twitter. And definitely no one calls it Web 1. And so I think the term Web 3 will start to fade into the background as we have a more colloquial kind of way to reference it.
If we're going to start changing names, I'm going to be the first to say that I think NFTs should be replaced to non-fungible therapists. But I'm biased. I'm really biased on that one. But I guess I agree. I think that you do a great job with like your community and the tools and helping others. One of the reasons why you stood out to me immediately was that I have this theory about NFTs and NFT communities in general, which is that before there was this kind of setup, this Web 2 setup, I guess, right? Or social media, whatever you want to use the word, where it was one-sided. There would be like performers, entertainers, educators, and we would all kind of be audience members. And now it's kind of been flipped on its back, where it's kind of two ways, right? Like the audience member can also now provide value, and the entertainer, the educator we're all creators. We are all our own little influencer bubble in growing. We're all artists. It's really cool to see. And what happens is that all these founders, for example, unfair to them in some cases, have gained this new responsibility where they have to kind of validate all of their community members, because every community member who does anything for the community, I would argue, wants to be validated in some way. They're doing it because they want to stand out. They also want to like help their worth and their community, of course. But I do think that there's a part of that. And what I like a lot about the data brand, I guess, is that you seemingly, I don't know how you find the time or how organized you are, but you somehow, I feel seen as one of your many, many, many followers, with whether it's through your questions of the day or through your engagements. And I don't think I'm the only one. I don't feel special, actually. I just feel like you do a really good job of doing that. So I would ask, how the hell do you do that?
I'm glad it comes through, because I do try hard at that for a couple of reasons. One is, man, everyone just wants to feel seen, including myself, right? And there's nothing, and this was again a reaction early on, asking questions of influencers, and they just brush you off, and it's not fun, right? And so that was kind of the genesis of that. But it is the other thing I was going to say is I hate the term influencer. I hate the we and them. I love your and I wrote it down. I'm going to use it kind of like the audience member starts to provide value. It's not one way. It's a conversation, and I'm just part of the conversation, right? And maybe I'm good at helping facilitate certain parts, but other people are good at other things. And so, we're all in this together. There's no us and them. But I would say, I took a page out of Gary Vee's book, which is respond to every single comment on every single post you've ever done. And I don't do that anymore. It's if I didn't have a baby and didn't have to wake up early to do that, or need to go to bed early with them, I'd be doing it in the early morning hours or late at night. It's a little hard right now, but when you do that, a couple things happen, right? One, everyone feels seen because you're responding to them, but also you're starting to make connections, right? You don't know what type of conversation is going to spin out of that comment you're making back on them, and they're making comments and spending some time. Why aren't you spending some time responding back? So it's about it's an easy tactic that feels very superficial, right? Which is just right back to every single person on every post, but it creates a really deep connection.
Love that response. I think it just shows how empathetic you are as well.
I'm over here looking at like the Mental Health Collective replies, and I'm like, man, we need to respond more to our stuff. Data, you're inspiring me, man.
Yeah, you learn so much too, right? When it forces you to read every comment, it forces you to really understand what people are feeling and thinking. It creates the empathy, right? You're training yourself a little bit. It's how you keep your finger on the pulse. I think there's different types of project founders out there. I think it has been in the past a popular kind of strategy where the project founders basically just are mysterious and never around or present. right? They're not in the Discord. They come in, everyone cheers them because they've only been in there, once a day, or and I think that is a recipe for losing touch with your community and really not understanding what they need, what they want, what they're doing, what they're interested in, and frankly, you're only as strong as your community. So I think it's not the strategy or tactic that I would employ myself.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think there's only so much like that air of mysticism. There's only so much you can carry before you've actually got to engage with the community and show that you actually care about them. But I was going to move on to something. I know you were talking earlier about mental health breaks, and I just wondered what you like to do on your mental health breaks.
So I would say until about 2 months ago, my mental health breaks would be NFTs. Like, even though NFTs are what I'm doing, I'm taking a break from NFTs to do NFTs. Like, it's just fun, right? There's nothing I'd rather be doing. It's not work. It's gotten a little stressful recently for some self-imposed deadlines and pressures I put on myself, and I'm working to get back to a place that's a little bit more fun. But it really was all consuming because that's what I wanted to be doing. Now, what do I do when I don't NFT? It's a good question. I'm a serial hobbyist, and so I've had, when my wife met me, I was into ceramics. I'd spent every night in the ceramic studio for 2 years making hundreds of bowls. She was like, wow, he's a ceramicist, that's his thing. And then next I picked up woodworking, and then watercolor painting, and then golf, and then NFTs. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he wasn't a ceramicist. His thing is diving deeply into things one after another. So
every
NFTs are kind of my
family
hobby.
reunion, they were just asking you, what are you up to now?
I love it. So I would say food has been the common thread through all of that. I've cooked in some kitchens around the world, and I have eaten my way through many a city. And so I think that cooking and eating and going out and having fun and spending time with friends and family is my way to relax. Either that or binge watching something on Netflix.
Well, just as a quick follow-up question on that, what is your favorite food?
I don't really. It's hard. I don't really have a favorite food. Just like I don't have a favorite NFT. I like them all for different reasons, and I'm in the mood of. You're in the mood for something one day, they might not be in the mood for the other, or I'll go on a jag cooking a lot from a certain type of cuisine, and then all of a sudden move to something else. So for me, it often depends on what I feel inspired by.
I think favorite, to nail down a favorite of anything is kind of hard. I think favorites are kind of like a flavor of the day. It just depends on how you're feeling that day.
Yeah.
It's funny because the question of the day today was, who was the favorite kid in your family? And I thought that was a fun thing because it just depends on when you ask, right? You're not asking them right after like you got in trouble. You're not asking your parents that. But I wanted to ask something else about. I didn't know that you had a cooking background. That makes sense. Recipes, you like how things work. You like to make things. You probably like to that makes sense why you have kind of like a Socratic method to like figuring things out as well.
Yeah.
But changing plans, that's a big thing too, right? Like people always have plans, and I like how open you are about admitting that you don't know what's going on. This is all new, and everyone's just kind of figuring it out along the way. But how what's your experience been with as far as like making plans, adjusting, being flexible, changing?
Yeah. Well, a plan for me is all about making sure you're being thoughtful, right? When you sit down and you make a plan, it's like, okay, well, why do I want to do that? When do I want to do that? And what's the reason for that? And who do I want to do it with? Could be a plan for anything, right? But it's the process that forces you to be thoughtful about it, right? And so whether you stick to that or not is another question, but at least you've thought about it, and you've kind of made some, I don't know, specific decisions or and so my plans change all the time for good reason, and often for rational reasons, because I already know the context. It's like, trying to give a good example, but because you've thought through it so well already, it's easier to make that pivot because you have the context of where you want it to be going and where you want it and where you're now headed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant response. And I know we had like the little pre-meeting earlier, and we like touched briefly on your wife. I was just wondering like what kind of impact she has like on you. Is she very supportive of what you do?
She's super supportive. Yeah. We had a nice talk about that this morning. It I always talk about, okay, so VeeFriends launched on my birthday more than a year ago, and I'm like in the car on the way to a birthday dinner, like, no, I have to buy this right now, like stop, and they're like, put your phone away, we're out to dinner. And then of course the next week we have a Hawaii trip planned, and like that's like the heyday of VeeFriends, and I just want to be on my phone talking to people, and and so it was some bad timing in there. And especially early on, the demands of the space were very 24/7. If you looked away for even a second, it was like you had to go take a college level course on getting caught up. But and then the other thing I would say is like, it really took 6 months for me to explain why I love the Web3 space to her. And I say that, well, maybe I'm bad at explaining it, but I say that because when I try to tell someone new, or people ask, how do you explain this to people? It's like, it's hard. There's a lot of different components to it. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So, but she is very much on board, and a lot of times, she helps me refocus on my vision and why I'm really here. It's easy to get caught up on, I don't know, a couple of specific things, or get caught in the weeds, and she's always there to remind me the original purpose.
In a way, it reminds me a little bit of like my mom, for example, when she found out that I decided I didn't want to be like a career lifetime licensed clinical therapist, and I kind of wanted to just jump into Web3 and be one of the first. And she just kind of put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "I don't understand what you're doing, but I support you, and I'm happy for you."
Yeah. No, she definitely. I think that was early on, and now she understands a lot. So, same with my parents. Usually my parents come to every spaces I do. I haven't done spaces in a while, so I don't see them in the audience, and I didn't give them a heads up. But
Well, just to kind of put you on the spot, then, how would you explain an NFT to someone in the simplest possible terms?
It depends on who they are, right? And so if they're into sports, I use the analogy of, well, what if every sporting event ticket, right, was an NFT, right? If they're into video games, I'm usually talking about skins and how you buy skins. If they're, I don't know a lot of people into collectibles, but it's easy to talk about baseball cards, right? And I just have different analogies based on the situation, the question, where I can kind of explain how that works in the NFT space. Like, for example, they're like, well, it's a digital image, I can just copy. I was like, well, I could go down to Kinko's. I could find card stock that probably matches a Michael Jordan rookie card. I could photocopy the Michael Jordan rookie card. I could put it on. I could beat it up, make it look right. Is it a real? It could be exactly the same, but is it a real Michael Jordan rookie card? No. Right. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, like I get that. and that always clicks for them. So I have some different things like that help explain it. I think what's tough to explain is the movement. And it's not tough to explain. It's more, people don't necessarily get how it connects to the NFTs space, but it's interesting because I kind of have my shtick on it, which is I've met a lot of people in this space, people from different backgrounds, different countries, who voted for different people, people of different views from me. And it doesn't matter. Everyone here is a little fed up with what's going on outside. It doesn't matter who you are, right? And so whether that's, you're sick of being manipulated by social networks, or you're really tired of corporate greed and feeling like you're having to work 2 jobs. It doesn't matter how much you make. Everyone feels like they don't have enough, right? And so I describe it as like the non-technological application of distributed ownership or blockchain technology, which is really focusing on the collective whole. And there's a movement and an energy where people are using kind of this common rallying goal of, hey, I think we can find something better, right? And that's an interesting angle because it's one that people don't necessarily think of, but I think it's one of the more powerful ones. And so it's something I often bring up when I'm after I'm already done my analogies or comparisons to other types of things in the world. That's usually where I go.
I agree with everything. I mean, I'm full time in this space for a reason. I believe in it. It's exciting. It's just it feels like a blank canvas that we could do so much with, especially, and it's good timing because the world outside of it seems like it's falling apart. So it honestly pushes me even more further into this space in a good way. But I guess as much as you probably want to resist the urge to identify as an influencer of any kind, I do rightfully, deservedly feel like you do carry a little bit more of a say, or at least a louder voice than some. So, do you feel any kind of pressure in that kind of position because of that?
I feel responsibility. I wouldn't say I feel pressure. I feel there's a lot of times I write a tweet and don't send it. I don't even put it in my drafts. It just tweets that if you had 500 followers or 50 followers, 1,000 followers, right? And you're kind of being run by your emotions, and you might say something a little snarky or something really highly opinionated. I feel like I can say that publicly, but you just don't know how it'll be taken, and you don't know who it might hurt or might not. And so I just feel there's a responsibility when people trust you and follow you and listen to your advice. As much as I tell people not to blindly follow anyone, including me, it's a responsibility. I don't feel pressure though. It's interesting. I have fun because I feel like I'm setting a really good example, and I have a lot of pride in that, actually.
I think you are doing a good example, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, like you say, he's setting a really good example. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that aren't setting a good example. Like, I know that there's like the degen life and stuff like that. But I would argue that like promoting that it's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your physical health. So, what would you like to see? Like in terms of influential people in the space, what would you like to see them promoting instead of like the degenerate life, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've said this before, and I don't think everyone likes it, but I have a lot of empathy for those people because I think they're going to wake up one day and realize, holy shit, like I really messed up some people's lives, or, and I'm talking more degenerates and like the people who are clearly manipulating markets and trying to do pump and dumps. I don't know how they'll be able to sleep at night, and I feel bad for them when they wake up to that. And so I think it's just like anything. Like when you're doing something that doesn't feel honest, it's going to eat away at you mentally and eventually physically. I think. So what should they be tweeting about? That's up to them. It's whatever kind of feels true to them. I think there's no wrong topic to be tweeting about. There's some wrong ways to talk about topics, I think.
What about when it comes to like plans and like running things? I know that the space can become really serious, especially with expectations from like communities, or maybe like impatience from communities and things like that. A lot of times, people kind of just like throwing ideas out there in a fun way, right? So I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts about like how you like to come up with new things, and maybe some of the roles that like come with being a founder.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we talked about this a little bit backstage. I think there's this expectation, and maybe a standard that's been set by a few founders in particular, that founders need to be 12 steps ahead, super buttoned up, always in control, always the smartest person in the room, always, having the best ideas. And I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And I also think it's unrealistic and not healthy for moving the space forward. And so it's tough. It sometimes feels like people judge you just based on your last tweet. And so if your last tweet was something they don't necessarily agree with, right, that isn't a fully formed thought, that you just want to shoot the shit about or bounce some ideas off of, or if you make a mistake, or if being the smartest person in the room isn't about knowing the most, but it's about listening the most or asking the right questions, I think there's some unrealistic expectations people have, especially, and this is kind of clicking for me. Okay, a traditional company, right? Everything happens behind closed doors, and you only see their product. I would argue a Web3 company, everything happens behind open doors because everyone's building it in public, in plain sight. They're talking about it. And so I think what might be normal in a more traditional business setting, where you have brainstorm sessions, you have bad ideas, and then the public only sees the good ones, is a little bit harder in the Web3 setting when you're building out in the open, right? And so much of success, whether we like it, is based on confidence in the founding team. And so that's tough. I would say early on, I realized you don't always have to be right. Right. And I think I need to take my own medicine there a little bit more. In fact, when you're trying to be right all the time, no one really wants to listen to you. So I think there's probably a little bit of self-imposed stress around that for me, and it's a tough balancing act a little bit, because when you're building something, people are relying on you and trusting you with their time and money to execute well. And I think I've had a slightly more messy process to getting there, as I throw ideas around and have conversations and try to treat people as equals. But sometimes that isn't the signal that people are used to getting from someone who is making some tough decisions, if that makes sense.
I love that. I mean, I think it's a fair expectation of the founders, but I think it's also important to point out that it's not realistic. And also, there's just so many problems in general that are going around socially, that it especially since this is a new space, I like the idea that that we should encourage each other to be a little bit more open, especially when we fail, when we're wrong about things, when we're just kind of trying things out, because everybody thinks, coming from like the Instagram world, right, that everything is perfectly curated and everything's perfect and everything's a highlight, everything's a home run. When in reality, we kind of just get there through like trying things out, experimenting, trying and failing, and trying new things. And I think that's what I heard when I was hearing what you were going through, because I think that we all go through that, and I think that we should push for a little bit more levity, and also a little bit more forgiveness and more openness about like the creative process.
Yeah, well said.
Well, to kind of follow up on that, I was just going to say as well, I feel like I'm at a TED Talk because I'm learning so much from you. But like I know, like just from seeing your tweets and just learning about you are a very creative person. I just wondered, what way is there anything that inspires you? Is there any way you look for creativity?
That's a good question. Being creative for me often is sparked by a problem. It's like, okay, here's a problem you see. What can you do creatively to address that, right? And so thinking about recently, some of the most creative solutions are the ones that are developed with some pretty hard constraints. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. Is like, when the smaller the box, the more creative you have to be in trying to figure out how to fit within it. What else I mean, creatively, it's really tough. I don't think I quite have a formula down, but I know when creativity strikes, I try to take advantage of it. I haven't necessarily seen a pattern quite yet about how that works. I will say there's a book called The Artist's Way. Really great book. I would say the main learning from it for me is sitting down every morning and writing 2 full pages by hand, total stream of consciousness. And over time, what you realize is you start zeroing in on some issues you're trying to tackle or some things you're excited about, and you just dive deeper and deeper and deeper, and it does spark creativity. And this woman who's been doing this for 15 years is the author. A lot of thousands of case studies of anyone from poets to architects to sports players who this has fixed creative blocks for them. So that's a good brute force way of doing it. I need to get back in that habit.
It makes sense that you're a writer or that you like writing. It's clear about the way you express yourself. It's like just with the way you talk, but also the way you write. I love writing. You wouldn't know based on my writing because it's not great, but I do genuinely love writing. And I agree that like if you kind of jump in a little, like the hardest part is jumping in, and then you find yourself you kind of discover creativity while you're doing it. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about identity, right? Like at this point, like I think I see that purple hat, I see that like bandit mask, and I already know who Data is. And the reason why I bring this up is because I just changed back my profile picture today to that little Homer Simpson. That's like not even an NFT project. It's just like it's really a satire of like NFTs in general, and I love it because I love The Simpsons. But I've grown attached to it, and I guess I wanted to ask you about like what your thoughts, opinions in general are about identity in this space.
Yeah, it's an incredible question. I would expand identity to and really call it brand, right? I know that that's often more of a corporate term, but everyone has a personal brand, whether they like it or not. You know, the way you talk, your profile picture are part of that. And hopefully you've created a brand that's true to yourself. And I suppose that's how it becomes your identity. Anyway, you know, when I first got into the space, the anonymous thing was weird. Who are these people? What are they talking about? I'm trusting them with how much money? And of course, we had like the whole wave and movement to have more docs founders, etc. And I agree with that part. But I do think when you don't know who someone is, they can be whoever they want to be, right? And people jump to, well, they're going to catfish me or they're going to scam me. But I see it more as you're not limited by where you were born, the color of your skin, what you believe.
I could be a dragon.
Right, you could totally be a dragon. Whatever you feel like represents you best. And I think that more and more people don't necessarily feel like they identify with some of the things they were born into. We're seeing that with gender. I think it's really awesome. But I see this as like an extension of that. Is like this is who I feel, and this is how I want to, have that shown to the public, and you can make those choices. And I think that's awesome.
I got to follow up then, because this is what happened to me. I kind of set up non-fungible therapists, and because of like I think that the NFT space is kind of like hyper socializing in a way, right? Just the GMs in general, like just the conversations that we have. I feel like I have a lot more interactions in this space than I used to have, right? And it's kind of forced myself to like present non-fungible therapists a lot more than I used to. It's to the point that I feel like I've leaned more into this like brand that I've created for myself, that I've kind of adopted it more into like my life. So my question would be like, is Data new, and like have you become more Data since you kind of have joined the space?
I would say that the Data, I call it a persona because it's not my name, right? But I would say that I feel more authentic as Data than I often do in real life. because of some of those things I talked about, right? I have history with people. I'm sensitive to saying the wrong thing, or, someone, there's so much social politicking going on, right? I have a clean slate. I can be whoever I want online, and it just feels like I'm more true to myself in that way, which is a little sad, and I need to probably spend some years in therapy figuring out why I'm not feeling true to myself in real life. But that's another, maybe that is this conversation, but that's another topic.
Yeah, I know you touched briefly on Gary V, and I think you are a member of V Friends, aren't you? Is there anything that you've learned specifically from him that you apply to yourself?
I would say early on, it was often what would Gary do or what would Gary say, and I say that more in terms of how he conducts himself on social media. So he really, it doesn't always, but I know he tries to lead with empathy, right? So someone says something snarky on your post, it's so easy to get in a whole little tiff with them, right? Have a battle back and forth. And, I early on was like, okay, well, what would Gary say? And I followed enough Gary that I kind of knew and I knew what to say. Since then, I've kind of developed my own approach. And my, I use that as a basis, but I feel like I do some things better than Gary now. And I don't agree with, so just like with anything, using someone else's template as a starting point, so that you don't have to create something from scratch, but you inevitably adopt it as your own and find new ways to do it differently.
I you know what I like about hearing that too? Like, there's people who are new to the space, who aren't as familiar with Gary Vee, but they come across Data, and now they're kind of thinking the same thing. They're the same thing. What would Data do in this situation? And I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, what are we talking? We're talking about people you look up to, role models. I don't like the term look up, but I think we don't have enough of that. All our role models are assholes, like the guy who rhymes with Telon Fusk. Just like, you have how many followers and you're conducting yourself how? Like, come on. That's not what this world needs, right? We need people to take a stand in the other direction, and I think Gary believes in that a lot, and that's why his V friends are all named after characteristics he thinks are important. As his is very business oriented, but he thinks are important characteristics to have in business and life. But I think that's the most awesome thing about V Friends, is to popularize and make cool again the things we all should be doing, right? And I, again, I'm opening up a little bit of can of worms. I think historically, religion has probably done that a lot for society, and as I think, at least in my circles, people have become less religious. They're the people they're looking to emulate their behavior. Haven't really thought through the implications of their behavior, if that makes sense.
I had a question about. Oh no, it's just like leaving me now, because I had a funny question too. But I did that.
Well, it can't be that funny if you forgot it.
Identity. What's interesting about identity? Let me just talk about my PFP a little bit, right? Your PFP and what you put up there says a lot about you, whether you think it does or not, right? In fact, if you think it doesn't and you put something random, that says something about you too. And I actually draw a lot of kind of connections or similarities to online dating. I, at one point, considered writing a book to mastering online dating, because I had a whole process that I loved and actually found my wife that way. But that picture you
Data was a player.
I was more a dating nerd. I was very methodical. But that picture you choose, like for me, right? The expansion punk represents what the project represents, which is inclusion and diversity, and that's their whole genesis story, right? I also happen to really, and I love seeing, there's UGB, there's UOBG. There's Scoops in the audience, some other ex-punks who I think have switched their PFPs, but some of my best friends in the space have come from that community. And then the PFP itself. I have other ones I like better, but this is the only one I own that's smiling. And I wanted that. I love the purple hat because it permeates across multiple projects. And so if I want to switch a PFP to another project, I'm looking for another purple hat so that at least there's some consistent branding between the two. And then I like the mask because I think we're rebels. We're here to disrupt. We're sick of the way we've been. I like to think of us literally as the rebellion in Star Wars, or like in Hunger Games. We're stepping up against the man, and we're banding together to do something different. And so anyway, that's kind of what and I haven't changed in a long time. In part because you do need some consistency, right? Like, people buy their PFP, and if it's not recognizable or they change it a lot, you might scroll past them when you might really want to be reading what they're saying.
I think
Data
there's a
the
lesson in
Rebel.
that, Sponge. You change your PFP every week.
I'm back. I'm sticking to the Homer. I like Homer for so many reasons. But the Data the Rebel, I love that. Also, I heard this line the other day that I think applies, which is nothing that I say is financial advice, but it might be social advice. And they were talking about like certain projects because there is value and like more value in certain communities and things like that. So I love that. But I remember the question that I had, which was data, because of your brand and everything that you offer, and also your name and just everything, you kind of seem to be this open-minded, but also like structured, like a grounded person or brand. This is how I've taken it. So I wanted to hear like I wanted to ask you like a silly question. Like, what do you think is like the most outlandish belief that you hold? Like, or spiritual, right? Like I pictured in my head, like, what if Data of all people like believed in ghosts, even though he's this kind of brand, right? So what is like the most outlandishly, like maybe hard to believe thing that you believe?
Yeah, that's one I thought about a lot. I believe that there's a force out there that we don't know about and we can't measure yet. Similar to, like before we were able to read or understand electrical or magnetic fields, right? That probably was magic. I think there's something out there that, and I think some people might call it dark matter. I think some people might call it energy, but there's something related to human connection and being connected to other people, and it has a lot of mental health and emotional ties too. But I believe there's something there. We just don't know how to measure it or put a name to it yet.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that. I think that was a great response. And I had a question actually. What I know, like in the space, you're really helpful towards people, and you just seem like a really empathetic person. Go out of your way to help people. But as a child, what was your dream job, and was it kind of related to helping people as well?
That's a good question. I don't know. I might have said a baseball player, but that's just because that's what I was into at the moment. Did I ever really want to be a baseball player? I just think that's what people expected me to want to be. I'm not sure I had a dream job. I will say that for a number of years, I've been looking for ways to help people, and I thought that it would be more in the professional setting. I'm a UX designer by trade and rose through the ranks and was pretty darn good at it, and felt like there were probably 5 or 6 different reasons why I was good at it, that none of them were really that hard, and that I could empower a lot of people, especially young kids who might not have access to that type of information, with just a little bit of training to go get top tier tech jobs. Frankly, I think if you came to every meeting with a piece of paper and a pen, you took notes, you wrote down every single follow-up that you have to do and other people do, and you actually followed up on them, you'd be promoted within 3 months. And it's a joke how easy that is, but people don't do it, and so things like that. and that was kind of, I kind of taken some steps towards that, but I think I'm seeing that play out in the Web3 space, and that's it's something my wife reminds me about a lot, and loving empowering others to make, teaching other people to fish, make smart decisions. And I think initially a lot of that was about trading NFTs and having the information you needed to make informed decisions. I think moving forward, I think it's a little bit more, I'm hoping and planning it to be a little bit more on the rebellion side. I think
data starting a revolution.
Sign me up.
Yeah, I am, is the truth. And I think, I think that it's going to be fun. And I think that I can help empower a ton of people to have more freedom, and that's what, at the end of the day, whether it's financial freedom, freedom from a boss, freedom from a government, freedom from who people think they are, right? I think it's about helping people feel more free.
Well, just to kind of follow up on that quickly, what would you say freedom is for you?
That's a good question. I think a lot of freedom for me is self-imposed, like freedom from my own, this is a mental health thing, freedom from my own issues and trying to deal with my own demons. I think that there's freedom to, it's tough. It's a little hard to describe. It's freedom to do the things you want to do, and do them the way you want to do them, right? And I think in my case, a lot of that, money's a piece, right? But so is like having a boss, right? At the end of the day, you're doing what they want to do, right? And you have input, and a good boss listens, and you can manage up, and lots of things you can do. But I think for me, freedom has been really following my own nose and my own passions.
I love that, and I think that if you keep talking like that, you keep doing the things you're doing, you're probably gonna keep inspiring a lot of people. So best of luck, and I'm so happy that you made time for this. I wanted to ask though, and I think this would tie in nicely to, I guess, wrapping up. You have a Discord, and you have you're starting to develop an awesome following. You're great at community building. How would you, I guess, explain like what your community is?
I see so many of, it's not my community, it's all of our community, but I see so many of the people I have built community with in here, and people have been super critical and helped me at different moments. So let's see what I'm going to say. If I were to distill it to one word, it's authentic. I think that I hope that people can come and feel like they can be their authentic selves. I think that a lot of people are there in an authentic way. Part of that is we're not an alpha Discord. It started from really humble, full roots, and I think I've been really happy that it's continued along that path of people are there because they want to be there, not because I'm gamifying it, right? And so they have authentic reasons to stick around. There's no, I do giveaways every now and then, but it's not like, oh, you're a level 17 because you've messaged this many times, and if you don't keep your notifications on and stay in the Discord, then you might miss out on that opportunity. It's like, no. It's like, if you want to be here, awesome. If you don't, that's fine too. But my goal is to create a place where you want to be, right? Not a place you need to be. And so I'm really trying to provide the container and the safe space for people to pursue things, and we're seeing a little bit of that now, and I hope we continue to see more and more of that. And I would say it is a closed Discord, because I've been trying to be really careful about who I let in, because I wanted to set a tone and establish some norms and create a community that I could feel proud of. And I think that's hard when you let 40,000 people in, but we're getting close to letting more people in. And I think that we've created a strong enough culture where those who come in will be folded in into the culture, not diluting it. And I hope they add new fun things. Anyway, and I would say that if there's anyone here who's not in it that wants to be, just send me a DM. If you can't send me a DM, comment on any of my posts saying, hey, will you friend me so I can send you a DM? And I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, well, I think your authenticity completely shows through. I think you're an amazing person and you're doing incredible things in the space. And what you were saying about community, like with what we're doing at like the Mental Health Collective, I feel just building that community from like the ground up and just really getting to know your community. It kind of sets like a meta or a framework, and people follow that example that you've set. So I think it's great you're doing that. And I know we're coming up to the end, but I just thought, is there any like sayings or quotes that you like to live your life by?
It's a good question.
More money, more problems?
I would say having fun is fun. And if my wife was here, should say that I don't like to do things that aren't fun. And unfortunately, as an adult, there's some things you have to do that aren't fun, which sometimes I try to avoid, or figure out how to make it fun. But I would say that I seek things that are fun, and as long as I do that, a lot of the other stuff works its way out.
I think you've done that too. Like even sometimes you've in your tweets, I've noticed you've come up with like some questions that I think I would never want to talk about that because it's generally like a boring topic. But I think that makes sense because I can relate to that a lot. But I also, and I think you do this too. Then is if something isn't fun, I'm gonna try to make it fun in my own way because if I'm gonna have to do it, I'm gonna at least try to have fun while I'm doing it. So
right. Well,
good luck on that.
And for me, that comes down to mental health, right? If you're struggling, or if your bucket's not full, or you're not feeling like you have the capacity, it's hard to make things that aren't fun. If you're feeling good and regulated, and you're feeling not at the end of your rope, it can be easy to make not fun things fun. So a lot of it does depend on your mental state and how you're doing, how you're taking care of yourself, and it feeds on itself, right? Because the better you feel, the easier it is to make things fun. The more things that are fun, the better you feel. So it can be hard to break that cycle when you're at the bottom, though.
Well said. I completely agree. Just a good reminder to everyone to just be a little forgiving to ourselves about stuff, right? And I need to take that advice. Mance needs to take that advice. Data, even you need to take that advice.
I need to tattoo it on my forehead.
That's the new saying. That's why he wears a purple hat, because he
That's
has
right.
that tattooed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good point to wrap this up. Data, we're going to put this on YouTube and Spotify, and hopefully it'll be on the internet forever. So if anybody comes along and hears this and is interested in what you're doing, where would you send them?
That's a good question. Well, I'd have them come follow me at DataNFT _ on Twitter. And from there, you'll probably have all the links you need. But if you ever have a question or want to chat, like I said, I try to respond to every comment. And so, yeah, I try to have as open of a door as possible within as long as time permits. But I really appreciate the two of you having me on and all the kind words, and love what you're trying to do and excited to follow along on your journey.
Well, the only reason is because you make it so easy.
I appreciate that.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for being here, Data. Mance, you are still my nemesis, and I will defeat you. Everyone have a great day, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.